My name is GiBi, this is Toto, and welcome to the Horror Homestead. This video is part of an ongoing series where I'm reading all the FNAF Frights stories, and in each video I'm summarizing, analyzing, and theorizing about the ongoing story in this FNAF series. I'm currently a believer in the Frights Fiction fan theory, which states that all these books are actually written by the in-universe Fazbear Entertainment in order to obfuscate the true horrors of their past. Me and Toto are now reading the 7th physical book in this series, The Cliffs. And right now we're going to be reading its first story, also called The Cliffs. At only 54 pages, The Cliffs is one of the shorter stories in the series, which is a good thing, because even Ellie Cooper could not save this nothing of a garbage story. I also want to warn everyone that this story is basically entirely about suicide, so if that's something you don't want to watch, you can skip to this timestamp. Let's get to our discussion on The Cliffs. Our main character is a guy named Robert. He has a 2-year-old son named Tyler and a dead wife. Tyler and dead wife Anna met in college. They got married a year after graduating, they got pregnant 2 more years later, and then Anna died in childbirth. Tyler is now 2 years old. So Robert's like 24. Keep that in mind throughout this story. Robert and Anna bought a nice house for really cheap because it's near the cliffs. The cliffs are very sharp cliffs that people used to commit suicide by jumping off of. Our Fazbear radar should be going off, telling us that these cliffs are probably full of agony. It seemed that everyone knew of someone who had chosen to end it all at the cliffs. The jilted high school homecoming queen from Robert's mother's generation, the businessman who lost all his money due to bad investments, the grandmother with a terminal cancer diagnosis. There were stories about the cliffs that were fact, and stories that were fiction. But, true or not, these tales made people look at the geological features with a mixture of fear and awe, especially Jumper's Cliff. Teenagers gathered there and creeped each other out with scary stories. Younger kids whispered that the ghosts of the departed still haunted the place where they had chosen to make that final leap. Man, it is crazy how some tales are fact, and some are fiction. So it's very possible that the cliff's agony is what allows for the events of this story to happen, although that's also very unclear. Like, Scott may have intended the cliffs to be a setup for something, but then by the end of the story that doesn't happen because the author wasn't sure what Scott was really going for. Speaking of not delivering, Anna dies in childbirth. Robert is left as the single father of Tyler, who was also born prematurely, so he needed to spend a lot of time in the natal intensive care unit. Robert has this moment where he's staring at baby Tyler, and he's like, "Tyler, you're all I have in the world." And then he's like, "Tyler, I'm all you have in the world, and I'm not good enough." This is what we would normally see as like the flaw in a Frights main character. It's their perception that will put them in danger and that they're gonna have to overcome or not in the finale. He's gonna learn to have to accept that he is good enough. But that's not what this story is about. That's not what happens. We get 10 pages of Robert being sad, with lines about how he looks at Tyler and all he sees are his wife's eyes. He goes to work and he's just sad all day. There's a coworker there named Jess who he was friends with before Anna died. But since then, he's just closed himself off from everyone, so they're not really friends anymore. Keep in mind, this has been going on for like 2 years now. So 2 years ago, before she died, he was friends with people at this place of work. This place of work where he would be like 22. So maybe he was there for like less than a year since he didn't graduate college until you'd be like 21 or 22. I don't know. I don't know the specifications of his friendship. So at work that day, Jess goes up to him and is like, "You should make some more time for yourself. Come out to dinner with us and all the coworkers next week." And Robert says, "Maybe." Robert then picks Tyler up from daycare, and the teacher tells him that that day they all drew pictures of their families, and Tyler doesn't have a mom. So the other kids were confused and were like, "Why don't you have a mom?" And so the teacher tells Robert that it's probably time to explain to Tyler what a mom is. She says the line, "The only thing you need to have to make a family is people and love." That's also not the moral of the story. This book is weird. Robert takes Tyler to go grocery shopping. They pass a Freddy Fazbear toy. Tyler wants the toy. Robert looks at it and sees that it's kind of like a baby monitor. It's called Tag-Along Freddy, and it monitors the child's health and safety and stuff by sending a signal to a wristwatch that is worn by the parents. This is not the same as Lonely Freddy, which was a 3-foot-tall robot. This is smaller and talks to you more like Fetch, so it's kind of like a lonely Fetch doll. Robert gets the doll, he sets it up, it starts sending him messages like, "Tyler is asleep, Tyler is happy, Tyler ate lunch." So it's a toy, and it's a friend, and it's a baby monitor. Tyler and Freddy go to play in their backyard sandbox. Robert's phone rings from inside and he steps inside to grab it. He then returns a moment later to see that Tyler is gone. Freddy is just sitting there in the empty sandbox. Robert looks around and he sees a white van speeding off. He calls 911, he reports his 2-year-old son missing, and he says there was a van. But he doesn't know if the van's related to him missing. Robert then starts having a total breakdown. Freddy sends him an alert that just says, gone. This whole event is obviously very upsetting for Robert because his wife died, and so losing his son is just unbearable. Obviously, it would be unbearable to anyone, but it's more unbearable to him because he says that Tyler is all he has, etc. The cops tell him to stay put and rest while they look. Robert just sits around the house for hours until Freddy sends him a message. Why don't you go to the cliffs? And this is when the entire story falls apart. And the ending of the story just makes it so much worse. My first thought when reading this was that Robert would interpret this as Freddy telling him to go and check the cliffs for Tyler. He would go there, and then the twist would be that the bear's actually telling him to jump. Like, haha, go to the cliffs, jump to your death, loser. And then that would be the turning point of the story, where he decides whether he's gonna jump or not. Not only is this not what happens, this is the opposite of what happens. We get 12 pages of Robert thinking that this baby monitor toy is telling him to kill himself. He never questions why the bear would do this, or how it knows what the cliffs are. Although, again, he's unstable because of the death of his wife and his son disappearing, so I guess that makes sense. But we, the reader, are not currently emotionally unstable. I mean, we might be, but, like, I guess you can't really account for that. But, like, as far as the book is concerned, we, the reader, are not emotionally unstable. And so the ending of the book is very obvious the moment this plot point is brought up. Freddy says go to the cliffs. Robert assumes it's telling him to go and jump off the cliffs, so we, the reader, are immediately just like, oh, the boy is probably at the cliffs and it's a misunderstanding. Which is stupid, because it means we have to read the entire rest of the book knowing the ending. It's Lonely Freddy all over again. A day passes, and now we have to cue the Frights recipe of repeating things over and over and over again, where Robert tries to destroy the bear to get it to stop sending him reminders to go to the cliffs. He tries throwing it out, but that doesn't work. He tries burning it, but that doesn't work. He runs it over with his car, and that doesn't work. He's just sad, and he waits for the cops, and he's like, I hope they come and give me an update, and then they give him an update, and the update's like, we're still looking, sorry, buddy. And he's like, oh man, I better destroy this bear, and then he tries, and then it doesn't work, and then he's like, oh man, I better wait for the cops to come and tell me what the update is, and then the cops are like, there's no update. So he's just sitting there thinking about what a bad father he is, and then he thinks that maybe he should go kill himself. The book does not do that much to show us that Robert isn't in the best mental state. It just kind of assumes that we would expect him to be in a bad mental state because the son is missing. But he's not, like, losing grip on reality. There's nothing in the narrative or the imagery or the word choice that's showing us that he's, like, going crazy or something. It's just like, he was sad because son missing. He thinks he should kill self. He does start to think that the bear made Tyler go missing, which is out of touch with reality. But at the same time, it like kind of makes a little sense. He bought the bear, and then almost immediately afterward, Tyler goes missing. So maybe it's the bear's fault. Also, the white van is a misdirection. The cops investigate it and see that it has nothing to do with the disappearance. So Robert decides, despite Tyler still being missing and not even believed to be dead by the cops, he's just missing, he's not dead. He could just come back, they could just find him. He decides to go through with it and to kill himself. The book doesn't sugarcoat it either. He's like, it's using the word suicide. The more the bear told him to go to the cliffs, the more suicide seemed like a welcome relief from his pain. If he went to the cliffs, he could join Anna in death. It's been shown that just discussing the topic of suicide makes people more likely to self-harm. Self-harm is considered by some to be a social contagion. When there's a suicide in a community, it usually increases the likelihood of another suicide to quickly follow it. So when I give out content warnings for suicide and self-harm, it's not just because I know that there are people who have lost loved ones to it and so might not want to engage with such a heavy topic in what's supposed to be an entertaining video. It's actually because people who are susceptible to self-harm could get those thoughts in their head again just by listening to discussion of the topic. That's a thing that's been heavily theorized by science. When you talk about this kind of thing, it should be done with great care and knowing that vulnerable people will hear it. That doesn't mean that you should treat the word suicide like the Voldemort and never say it. That's absolute cringe. The new Mean Girls movie, taking out the word social suicide and saying social decimation, total cringe. I hate that they did that. Saying the word suicide also doesn't get your video age restricted on YouTube. That is a myth. Discussion of the topic gets your video age restricted. Not using the word doesn't mean that it shouldn't be age restricted. It just makes it harder for the YouTube system to find out that you're actually talking about something that you shouldn't be talking about. So when people say, like, self-unaliving, they're actually still just breaking YouTube's rules. They're just making it harder for the robot to see that. It's stupid. I hate it. I hate the term self-unalive. I hate the term sewer slide. Having to make such a serious topic sound silly to be palatable means that you probably shouldn't be discussing that topic. I think it's absolute clownery. So I do see the criticism of this story for children depicting Robert's thought process for convincing himself to take his own life. In Hide and Seek, Toby kills himself, but that's like a lesson in pride or something. This is Robert justifying that the pain will end if he does it. He'll see his loved one again if he does it. And even though he ends up not doing it, the pages upon pages of him justifying to himself why he should end his own life are just a lot compared to the single paragraph where he talks himself out of it. Which means that people are going to walk away from the story remembering more about the reasons why he should do it rather than the reason why he shouldn't do it. So Robert takes Freddy and brings him to the cliff so that they'll both be destroyed. Keep in mind, Tyler is probably still alive. So on top of this being a stupid action because suicide is bad, it's stupid because if Tyler's found alive, now he won't have a father. He then changes his mind on a dime. Robert held up the teddy bear and stared at it. "This is what you want, right?" he asked. Tears clouded Robert's eyes as he thought of Anna dying on the operating table during what should have been the happiest occasion of their life, the birth of their son. She never would have chosen to make such an early exit from life. She wouldn't have wanted Robert to make an early exit either, especially when, unlike her, he had a choice. The living Robert had been doing since Anna died wasn't really living. Anna wouldn't have wanted that for him either. She wouldn't have wanted him to shut out his friends and eat sad little sandwiches at his desk at work. She would have wanted him to go out with his co-workers and eat half-price sushi. She would have wanted him to enjoy fatherhood, but also enjoy the company of other grown-ups. Anna had loved life and had loved Robert. She wouldn't have wanted him to give up on himself. And she wouldn't have wanted him to give up on Tyler either, not when there was even a small hope that he might be alive. If there was just one small chance he could hear his little boy's voice again. Robert held up the despised bear and stared into its empty eyes. He drew back his arm and pitched the doll as hard as he could over the edge of the cliff. He spat over the ledge in defiance of what the evil toy had almost made him do, of what he had almost let the toy make him do. "Tyler wouldn't want me to!" Robert screamed after the bear plummeted to the rocks below. His voice echoed, "Two, two, two," into the canyon. Robert looked down at the rocks below, but also up at the sky, where the dawn had turned the clouds a rosy pink, the color of a dress Anna used to wear. He always told her that dress brought out the roses in her cheeks. Anna had wanted to live. Tyler, please let him still be alive, Robert thought. Wanted to live. The two of them would want Robert to live, too. So remember how at the beginning of the story he thought to himself how Tyler's the only thing that he has and now he's the only thing that Tyler has? Robert does not think to himself, wait, if I die, Tyler will have nothing. He just goes, Anna wouldn't want this. I should treat myself for sushi. Like, it was right there, Ellie Cooper. It was right there. You could have related it back to his discussion in the beginning of the book, but you didn't. Yeah, the reason he shouldn't kill himself is because his wife wouldn't want him to, and because Tyler might still be alive. Yeah, we know. Then the ending happens. While standing at the top of the cliff, Robert hears a weird crying noise. He goes to investigate, and finds a small little cave, and guess what? Tyler is inside. He's been hiding in there all scared. Freddy didn't want him going to the cliffs to jump, he told him to go to the cliffs because that's where Tyler was. Tyler, sitting in the sandbox, saw a doggy running by, and he chased it to the cliffs and then he got lost and scared, so he spent the night in the cave. Robert looks at where the bear had landed at the bottom of the cliffs, and it's gone. Why is the bear gone? I don't know. We'll talk about it in the analysis section, I guess. The story ends with, your mommy used to have a dress the color of those clouds. He decided he would no longer keep silent about Anna. Tyler needed to hear about his mom, just as Robert needed to talk about her. If they talked about her, if they thought about her, there was a way in which she would still be with them. Mommy pretty, Tyler said. Yes, she was, Robert said. Would you like to look at some pictures of your mommy sometime soon? Yeah, Tyler said. Tomorrow, Robert decided, he would take the photos of Anna down from the attic. He could put some on the mantle in the living room, and maybe one in Tyler's room too. We'll do that tomorrow then, Robert said. And I can tell you some stories about her too. Your mommy was very pretty and smart and nice. Daddy's nice too, Tyler said. It was a high compliment from a 2-year-old. Thanks, buddy. I love you, Robert said, holding Tyler securely as he walked farther and farther away from the cliffs. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, buddy. Robert set Tyler down on the ground. Tyler slipped his hands into his daddy's, and they walked together toward home. Do you get it? Because him having Tyler's hand is leading him away from the cliffs, and the cliffs are suicide. And because he has something to live for, which is his son, he shouldn't die? I guess we'll talk about it in the analysis. Analysis. The story's dumb. Guy lives a hard life. Something else goes wrong. He wants to die, chooses not to kill himself. The issue resolves itself thanks to Freddy Fredbear. He learns that he should go out to lunch with his coworkers and not hide pictures of his dead wife in their attic. Like, him making the choice to start telling Tyler about his mother is something that eventually would have needed to happen. Like, it's an emotional moment for Robert, but it's not like the moral of Tyler's disappearance is that he should teach him about the mother. My son disappeared. I guess that means it's time to break out the photo album. Like, the son disappearing led him to want to kill himself, and him convincing himself to not kill himself because it's not what the mother would have wanted, then led him to think that maybe it's time for him to share the positive thoughts that he had of the mother with the son. So it's like there's like 3 steps in there, and the sharing the photo album with the son is just a lot less dramatic than the moral of not killing himself. I already talked about how the suicide stuff is dumb. Like, the book just does not justify him, like, going crazy and wanting to die even though Tyler's been gone for less than 24 hours and is still believed to be alive. So then having him go, wait, I shouldn't kill myself, it's just an unearned epiphany. The twist is obvious. It comes from, like, literally the moment that it happened in the story. You can see it from a mile away, which was the same problem with Lonely Freddy. The story happening this way is also just very silly. Like, what is the point of the cliffs having agony or whatever if the kid just wandered off because of a dog? Or if the doll wasn't possessed? Knowing the ending, there was nothing behind the plot. It was just a weird accident, a coincidence. You can't even say it was the field. The back of the book has 2 morals. The synopsis starts with, "Some things must be learned the hard way," and that it ends with, "But in the malevolent universe of Five Nights at Freddy's, there's always an education in pain." Things being learned the hard way means that someone might make a bunch of mistakes and not learn until they're severely negatively impacted, right? Like, you have to hit rock bottom before you can really change. And then the other moral doesn't imply that the person did anything wrong. Like, it's just saying that the world sucks and you're gonna get hurt for it. Bad things just happen. So, like, Anna's death maybe taught Robert something, but did it? I think the point of the story is that Robert was close to suicide, and so now that he's felt that, he's learned not to kill himself. So he hit rock bottom by not literally hitting the rocks at the bottom. The moral is definitely, don't commit suicide, and don't do a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and don't bottle up your emotions and feelings and not tell them to people. But the way the story is told is just so weird. It's not like Robert didn't value Tyler and then by losing him he now does value them. He always loved him. So what lesson did he learn? Don't leave your son in the care of a robot? Don't live in nature? Find something to live for besides your son because he might die? Like, what? There's a Jenny Nicholson video I really like where she makes fun of a stupid movie, and the video is called Escape from Tomorrow is a Dumb Exercise in Misery, and she was making fun of the movie for obviously not having anything really important to say, and the director just being really pretentious. And at one point, she has this little rant.
This shot of the castle and the Walt Disney statue, and then it pans up to the sky, and Jesus is written by, like, a skywriter. So obviously the crew was just there on a day that happened, and they shot it, and Randy was like, that's so deep. Because it's, like, ironic, because consumerism?
Every time I read a bad one of these stories, that's how I think about the moral in my head. Like, the writer is just sitting there, asking themselves what the point is, and then they open their mouths as if to make a suggestion to themselves. It's about not letting technology raise kids or something. And then as they say it, they, like, decide mid-sentence that that is what they're going for. And so it goes from a question to confidence, like, mid-word. The moral is not letting technology raise kids?
Consumerism?
Her saying consumerism is the tone that I read this entire story in. In Blackbird, I said I hate the notion that people will think that a work can be written so poorly that it's dangerous because it produces a bad moral. And while I think that this story is bad, and it's likely to be the first story that a 12-year-old reads about suicide, and so that's, like, you gotta handle that carefully, I don't think that it's dangerous. I think the story is poorly written in that the circumstances of the story are not something that is likely to happen, and it's difficult to extrapolate the moral to other circumstances. Right? Like, let's take a morality tale like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. The moral is, if you lie, people aren't going to believe you when you start trying to tell them something important. The moral is not, don't say that there's a wolf at the gates. The moral of this story is, like, don't bottle up your emotions. Anything to do with the suicide is just nonsense, because he didn't have a real reason to do it. And, like, I know that you can say that there's never a real reason to do it, but, like, any circumstance that a person might have in their life that might have them think these same thoughts are going to be more reasonable than what he thought. Than what Robert thought. Like, when people struggle about having, like, thoughts about why it would make sense to end their own life, they're gonna have more reasonable reasons than Robert's, because Robert's reason doesn't make any sense. So I think it's sort of like teaching its lesson poorly. With that said, I don't think the lesson is harmful. The lesson is clearly, don't hurt yourself. It's not like they're accidentally getting the wrong lesson across. So, like, the book, it does spell it out at the end, and it is a good lesson. I just think it's poorly written, but that doesn't mean it's, like, dangerous or something. It just means it has a stupid, blatant, obvious ending. Speaking of the ending, there's a big mystery toward the end of the story. Freddy is gone, but where did he go? Is the Tyler in the cave really just the tag-along Freddy? I doubt it. There's nothing else in the story to imply that. Like, did the Freddy orchestrate the dog to chase the kid away? Did the Freddy want to be thrown off the cliffs to absorb the agony from the decades of suicide? And then it got to the bottom, and it took on the form of Tyler the way that, like, Eleanor does with Sarah, and then it ran back up the cliffs, and then it hid in a cave, and then pretended to be Tyler? Like, is that what people are saying happened when they say that they think that the Tyler at the end is just the doll? If that is the case, that doesn't add anything to the story, because it's still, like, presented as a happy ending. So if there is, like, this dark reading of it where the kid is fake, it's like, we never find that out, so what's the point of that even happening? It also doesn't really fit with the doll's plan. If the doll is intentionally luring him there to get him to jump, and then plans on him not jumping, but instead throwing the doll over the cliff so it can absorb agony so it can become the child, like, the idea that that is what he would do is just so silly. But obviously there is a reading that the doll is bad, because once he throws it away is when he has the epiphany that he shouldn't hurt himself. So was the doll causing him to hurt himself, but like in an agony magic way, or just in like a psychological way because he was misinterpreting what the message he was sending was? These are questions. When a book leaves you with a lot of questions, you should be like, wow, this is going to take a long time to unpack. I wonder what like the writer's intention was of having all these different layers of meaning, but the story doesn't have layers of meaning. It's just written poorly. Speaking of Lonely Freddy, which I keep complaining about, the only reason that this story is not as bad as Lonely Freddy is because it's significantly shorter, the protagonist is less insufferable, and because you only know the ending like halfway through the story as opposed to at the very beginning of the story. So while this is definitely an F-tier story, Lonely Freddy is still the worst. Toto, did you like this story? It's because you were scared of what happened to the Freddy toy at the bottom of the cliff? Yeah, the cover shows the toy destroyed at the bottom of the cliff, which is explicitly not what happens because he gets thrown to the bottom of the cliff and then we don't see him on the ground. He disappears from the ground. The cover is not something that happens in the story. Like, it's explicitly not what happens. People compare the story to FNAF 4 because there's, like, a bear with a speaker in it, and so they compare it to Psychic Friend Fredbear, and I don't really see it. Psychic Friend Fredbear did not have a speaker in it. It wasn't a tag-along Freddy. It didn't send messages to your watch. It can't teleport. It can't talk to the child. It doesn't ever become a flower. It's just that when you come up with the concept of an evil nanny cam in a FNAF book, you're gonna make it a Freddy doll that has a speaker and a camera in it, regardless of the fact that some people theorize that a different doll has, like, a camera in it or something. Frights Fiction-wise, I don't know. Maybe the story will make people less likely to believe stories of Freddy's projects being harmful. Like, I'm gonna go buy the new Freddy doll. Didn't you hear that, like, Freddy dolls eat people sometimes? No, silly, the Freddy doll actually helped that guy find his son. Like, I don't know. That's all I got. Well, thank you for watching. Be sure to be nice to each other in the comments. Consider supporting the creators you most admire. Got some merch back there. Never lose sight of the things that are most important to you, and remember that Freddy stands for Friendly, Respectful Engagement, Discussion, and Discourse Yields Success. I would like to thank my April patrons: Brandon, Lady Lilac, Lauren V, Morgan, Nan, Scott, Sophie, and Suka, as well as Billy, Klaus, Eliza, Helmar, Johnny the Night Guard, Kira, Lauren R, Rhiannon, Rose, Sebhar, Thamagata, World's Greatest Bard, Ya Boy Peachy, and Zany Face, as well as Emily, HHD, Jinx, Jose, Mustard Shirt Guy, Rolo, and Riley, as well as Jeannie and Ray. We will see you next time.